I get amazed at times how issues that are not women's issues are turned into women's issues and how little attention men's issues get. What made me think of this was I saw a video by Alex Clark. And Alex Clark is a female conservative commentator, and she was talking about how there's issues in the food supply. I found out that women make 80% of consumer buying decisions. What I've noticed is common for women is to operate in a state of fear. And what happens is people come in and say that the water supply is poison, the non-stick toxic pans. And what I'm not saying is that there's not any truth to that, right? But what I am saying is I do think that the market capitalizes on female neuroticism because we're very anxious and we have a tendency to think everything is the end of the world, where men have a tendency to stay more calm. And when I saw this video of Alex Clark talking about how the water supply is poisoned, the food supply, the toxins, GMOs, all that stuff, all I could think about was how there is someone out there making so much money off of female neuroticism.
Our next presenter is Alex Clark. Ms. Clark is a food activist, advocate for healthier food systems, and the host of Culture Apothecary podcast. She is committed to educating consumers on the importance of organic farming and the dangers of harmful additives in food products. Clark's mission is to inspire positive change in both personal health choices and industry standards, driving the movement toward cleaner, more responsible food production.
My average listener, like me, is a woman in her late 20s and early 30s, and we demand accountability for how the millennial generation was turned into a science experiment without our informed consent for the sake of enriching big pharma, big ag, and big food. Millennial women have started to have kids for the first time, and they are disillusioned with how hard it has become to not only get pregnant, but also raise kids who are healthy, happy, and mentally.
Okay, so when you guys hear people talking about problems, the first thing you have to understand about media is problems are always going to get more clicks than solutions. And the second question we have to ask is this true? Are women having a lot of children? Are women having children at all? That's my first question. What would, not what we want to be true, right? What would the data indicate is true? When we look at the birth rate, is it increasing or decreasing? Okay, decreasing. When we look at the number of children per family, is it going up or is it going down? When we get the option to postpone motherhood or have it sooner, what do we pick? I'd like to say this is not a moral statement. This is not me saying worse or better, but describing, as someone that runs a show, my priority is to be as accurate as possible.
Disillusioned with how hard it has become to not only get pregnant, but also raise kids who are healthy, happy, and mentally well.
Okay, so why is it hard to raise kids that are healthy, happy, and mentally well? Why is it hard to get pregnant? Many people use things as a buffer. In this case, my generation of women, millennial women, waited to have children. We got on birth control young. These were our choices. Not good, not bad, just these were choices. And now when you have a whole industry saying you guys can just blame the food industry and blame all of these companies for your problems, we're jumping on that. We're biting. The internet's been around since I was 14. I understand it's very confusing, right? I understand it's super confusing to figure out what's healthy, what's not healthy, but I'll use myself as an example. I've spent a lot of time getting in shape the last 6 months and eating better. I have known for years that I eat too much sugar. I knew this. There wasn't some company that tricked me into this, but it was because I wanted this food and that's what I would buy. Many times the companies are just catering. They're trying to make money and we pick the unhealthy stuff. And then later we cry and pretend, oh, I didn't know. The internet has been around for a decade. I understand it's confusing, but life is about choices and trade-offs. And if we made the choice to not look into what we are eating, whose fault is that? Is it the companies or is it us?
I am proud to represent them. The poisoning of our food and the environment is the issue for these independent women. It is devastating us and our children. My name is Alex Clark, and I host Culture Apothecary. By virtually every measure, millennials are more health conscious than any generation before us.
Okay. Again, I want to just ask the question, is that true? Are we more health conscious when the average woman and man, right? When both genders are overweight. The majority are overweight. And the next question is being overweight something in our control? Do these food companies, do they magically make us eat too much? Is this in our control?
But at the same time, we are also the sickest. That is, until our children end up surpassing us. The next generation of children is predicted to not outlive their parents if we continue on the trajectory that we are currently on. When in human history has that ever been the case? We are fatter than any prior generation at this age. We're having more fertility issues. New cancer diagnoses in the US are projected to top 2 million for the first time.
So what's the easier choice to blame? Is the easier choice to say, hey, companies, it's your fault? Or is the easier choice to say, hey, maybe I eat too much and I need to fix that?
This year, and these new cases are almost all driven by young people. This is according to American Cancer Society data. What happened? Growing up, millennials were handed
We ate too much. We ate too much sugar. Yeah.
health advice that was inaccurate, mistaken, or downright fabricated. Almost everything that we were taught about food and health was made up. The only guidance that we received on what to eat came in 1992 via the food pyramid, a completely manipulated work of fake public health.
Okay, let's take this food pyramid excuse. I was also taught the food pyramid. The first time I remember hearing about that it was fake was a decade ago. In my case, it still took me a long time to change my eating habits. That was a choice. So, when has the internet been accessible to everybody? A decade. And I try to say this to women. Everybody makes money off of us. And so it's much easier for them to sell us something as a solution or blame a company, a corporation for our decisions and sell us the answer to our problems.
Crafted by the Department of Agriculture.
They said, Pearl, it's both issues. Look, I'm not saying that it's not, that there's not birth control in the water, that there's not unhealthy food. What I am saying is the internet is here. There are healthy people every day that figure out the answers. And as an adult, it's on you to figure it out. There are people in third world countries that do not have access to clean water, that are living in dire poverty, and yet we complain more when we have access to more technology and more healthy food.
Sure. The food pyramid told us that all fat was bad, a lie. It told us to make complex carbs like pasta, bread, and processed breakfast cereal the bedrock of our diet, not because it was healthy, but because it was the most profitable recommendation for big ag and big food. We became the first generation subjected to sugary, fattening, inflammatory foods deliberately engineered to be as addictive as heroin, thanks to the food companies buying the scientists from the cigarette companies for that exact purpose.
So I have a different theory on this stuff. I think that businessmen are not nearly as nefarious as you guys think. I think they said, look, these people love sugar. They want to make money. And they said, look, they're eating it anyway. Let's just be the source. Sure, I'm sure they made some misleading marketing materials, but I don't really buy that it was some grand plan.
In the 80s and 90s, the same era as the food pyramid scam, youth obesity tripled from 5% to 15%. Today, in 2024, close to half of all American kids are overweight or obese. Now, why are you surprised? Ultra-processed foods make up 70% of the...
Okay, now let's think about this. Why are the children overweight? Is it because the families are letting the school raise them and maybe the parents are not involved in what the child is eating? Or are we going to blame the companies? Remember, we're adults, so you can buy some grilled chicken, lettuce, vegetables. I mean, guys, ever since I graduated high school, I knew grilled chicken was pretty healthy. Yet, I preferred some chicken tenders. You know what I mean? Like, when you're young, how many, if young people were really worried about health, would they consume alcohol at the levels that they do? No.
Calories that kids eat now. Now, most of us millennial girls got our first period when we were 13 to 15 years old. Pediatricians wasted no time telling us that there was a magic pill that could solve all of our problems in a 10-minute wellness checkup with no informed consent about the risks or side effects.
Okay, let's talk about birth control. I know many women that had fertility issues after being on birth control for a decade. But I also remember when the birth control was being passed out and the young women were getting on it. They were not concerned about health. And I remember at that time period, I said, hey guys, I don't think this is good for us. They did not care. And now I don't know why we're surprised turning off your fertility for a decade has issues. We can blame the companies or we can take some accountability for our choices and deal with the consequences.
What problems were we solving exactly? A couple pimples. We were advised to not worry about learning to track our cycle or understand our hormones. No conversation about how our likelihood to experience anxiety or depression would increase by 80% on the pill.
And I promise you, they would not care. I promise. I promise. The 16-year-olds, 18-year-old women that are getting on these pills are not concerned about health. They are not. Otherwise, they would not be engaging in such risky behaviors. And the data proves this, right? If they were concerned about health, there wouldn't be binge drinking at college. If they were concerned about health, we wouldn't see the obesity rate. If they were concerned about health, we wouldn't see the STD rate we do. We wouldn't see the abortion rate. What data do you have that indicates people are concerned about health?
10 to 15 years went by on the hormonal birth control pill. We stayed on the pill because no one advised us it was only ever supposed to be taken temporarily. Then we wanted to have children. We got off birth control for the first time in our adult lives only to discover that we had major fertility issues that the hormonal birth control hid. Infertility is going up 1% every year.
Okay, why? Remember, 90% of our eggs are gone by 30. 90%. What makes more sense? That it's the companies, the food supply, the birth control? I'm not saying birth control does not contribute, but if I had to guess, based on what I would say is common sense, I would say delaying motherhood is more what causes this stuff. But what we'll do often is we will go blame the companies. When, again, everything's available online, we can solve these problems or at least improve them.
Suddenly, starting a family means spending tens of thousands of dollars on IVF and other fertility treatments because even more medical interventions are always the first solution rather than addressing the root causes of the problem.
Obesity. Again, if we're concerned about health, our actions would show that we are concerned about health, but we're not. It says you can get pregnant after 30. That's true. But it's more likely that the kid will have issues and it's less likely that you will get pregnant. It's a much easier to blame the companies, to blame the elites, to blame this big plan. And I'm not even saying that it's untrue. But what I am saying is we have all the tools to prevent these things and we are not using it.
If the IVF even works, millennial moms are seeing the same drama play out for their own children, but on a far greater scale. They want to raise healthy kids, they do. But where can they go for info? The studies are bought and paid for by the food companies.
Okay. Do millennial women want healthy children? If millennial women wanted healthy children, then we would have children when they are the healthiest. The reason I'm bringing this up is because what I don't like is playing pretend. Let's not pretend this is all the company's fault. and we have no part to play.
They look for unbiased info on the news, but that's funded by Big Pharma. In 2022, the pharmaceutical industry spent an average of $1 billion per month on advertising in the United States. What news company is going to risk reporting the truth if it means missing out on advertising dollars like that? Their pediatrician, these moms' pediatrician, had less than a day of nutrition training in all their years of medical school. They don't even know what seed oils are when they ask about them. If one of my listeners has a child today, there is a 1 in 50 chance that child will have a deadly peanut allergy, 4 times what it was just a few decades ago. And that rate is rising. Children today are about 20% more likely to develop type 1 diabetes than they were 20 years ago. Childhood cancer rates are rising a percentage point every year. Asthma is up, so is ADHD, allergies, virtually every type of psychological disorder. In 1980, autism was diagnosed at a rate of just 3 or 4 per 100,000 kids. Today, a newborn child has a 1 in 36 chance that he or she will be autistic.
Okay, so a lot of these side effects are caused from delaying motherhood. What's the easier scapegoat? Their fault? Our fault. Their fault? Our fault. And what frustrates me is it just seems like there's always a scapegoat. We never had any part of this. It was just the companies. I mean, how many times are we going to get tricked before we say, hey, you know what? That was my choice. These are the consequences, and that's all right. Or that was my choice. These are the consequences. I didn't research enough. I wasn't concerned about it at the time. I didn't care. Those would be more honest answers because I don't meet, and I learned this from interviewing 1,000 women. The women at 22, they're not concerned about health. At 21, 19, 18, they're taking shots. They're chugging beer at their college parties. I mean, they're not concerned about endocrine disruptors. That's an old woman problem, you know? But I am not saying that what she's saying is untrue. But what I'm saying is I have seen people take health very seriously from a young age. There was a girl in my high school. Her name was Caitlin. This woman, she was on my team, and she ended up quitting sports, and she just got super into nutrition. I mean, she would be measuring stuff at lunch, and she had like really good shape. She'd go to this gym near us, and that was her choice, but she was one of like the only woman in our grade that was doing that. So,
and that rate is also
really, PCOS and undiagnosed chlamydia is more than 50% of infertility in women at 30 trying to have kids. I don't know if that's true, but that's crazy if it is.
Rising every year. Who cares about politics if the next generation is dead or close to it before they can even vote?
Oh, gosh, we are the most privileged. Hold on, guys. I just want to show you guys. All right, so we're saying that we're almost dead before we can even vote. I just want to show you what like other countries look like.
Hey, you gangster, local gangster.
I mean, I don't know. America seems a lot cleaner than this. I don't know. Okay, men at 18, they got a pill that turned off. They could not have children anymore. Or it turned off their fertility, much like our pill. And men took it and said, okay, I know this is a risk, but I do not want to have children right now, which many women do. Do you think at 30 they would have a hearing blaming the doctors? Or do you think they would say, well, I got the short end of the stick? And the reason I'm pointing this out is because we as women, we waste so much money on this stuff. We spend so much money because we can be very neurotic. We can think that it's the end of the world and that we're going to die all the time. I mean, how many of you guys had a mother that always thought she was dying or she had some kind of cancer or whatever? When usually, and men are tend to be a lot more observant. It's generally just a couple of habits we have that are bad. It's generally too much sugar. And eating too much sugar, as someone that struggles with that, this is not new information. This is not something that's been hidden. I've known for a decade that this is a problem. This is most overweight people's problems. It's sugary drinks, sugar in alcohol, sugar in bread, sugar in food, cupcakes, donuts. None of this is shocking, and we should not be shocked. And life is a lot better when you realize we have all the answers to our own problems. I mean, what the practices are of some big companies that sell stuff, we can't control that. It's not going to change. And frankly, I don't even think the population wants it to change. Most people want sugary foods. Most people are overweight. So I don't see that issue changing.